Welcome to this edition of the Boon of Wireless podcast. I'm your host, Jon Horovitz, founder and president of Atrium Unlimited Consulting, coming to you as always high above the streets in northern New Jersey at ANJ Media. Yes, New Jersey, where the Hindenburg, a German passenger airship, exploded in Lakehurst, New Jersey in 1937, killing 35 people. Miraculously, 62 of the 97 passengers and crew survived, and this led to the much often replayed newscast, "Oh, the humanity." Andrew, have you ever been in an airship or a blimp?
No, John.
No, maybe you should.
No, thank you, John.
Okay.
John,
Yeah.
you're looking a little different today.
Oh, yeah. I went with the sweatshirt look today for a couple of reasons. One, it's fall up here in northern New Jersey, and it's freezing based on what we had this summer. And I found that some of my viewers wanted to see a more casual, relaxed John. So I'm going to give this a shot today and see how it goes. Okay. All right, let's get started. Our guest today is the co-founder and has been the chief executive officer of Network IP for the past 26 plus years, where he and his team have provided and adapted international calling solutions for multiple markets, including the MNO and MVNO industry. Pete Pattullo brings over 45 years of experience in telecommunications technology, customer service, product management, marketing, maintenance, operations, and support. He was the chairman of the Industry Association American Prepaid Phone Call Association, or the APPA, from 2013 to 2016. In 1997, Mr. Pattullo joined Network Operator Services Incorporated as Chief Technology Officer and subsequently co-founded and managed Network IP. He previously spent almost 14 years at Nortel in a full range of positions. Please join me in welcoming to the broadcast, Pete Pattullo. Pete, welcome. It's great to see you.
Yeah, good morning. From here in Texas, not quite New Jersey, but I hear that fall thing. We have it for like one day. We go from summer to right to winter, but we're still summer here.
Yep, it's fall. It's a great time of year up here. The leaves changing and pumpkins and all that good stuff. So anyway, well, let's get to know Pete Pattullo. Pete, tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I am a husband and father of a couple daughters, and I have grandchildren, so that makes me a grandfather. And so I'm certainly not a spring chicken here by any means. I think I'm probably closer to your age than others.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Yes. Okay, go ahead.
I started telecom back in 1979. So 45 years later, fortunately, I started out in the Air Force. So I served in the Air Force and went in to work on telephone systems, which I thought was computers, but at that time it was still old relays and electromechanical and so forth. But I'm one of the few people around at this point that actually got to work on that old antiquated technology from the 30s. So
very good.
But of course, you said I co-founded Network IP and became CEO back in 98, 26 years ago, and really been focusing on, again, adapting that, like we said, for the international calling space. It's interesting because my first introduction to international calling was actually at Nortel. I was one of their engineers and was tasked to turn up the first international gateway for Sprint 40 years ago. So back in 1984, when the divestiture originally happened and the carriers like Sprint came along, we were the first international gateway outside of AT&T. And so we got a lot of experience with that and continue to work on that throughout my career. But that's kind of till today. So here we are again, 40 years later from that perspective, still in telecom, still having fun. And enjoying at this point, our whole thing is to disrupt the market. And so we'll certainly talk more about that.
Okay. Let's talk about international communications, or what we refer to as international calling, when you're here in the United States or North America, depending on your plan, and you want to call Europe, Asia, Africa. Let's talk about that. What is it? And how did we get to where we are today in international calling?
Well, if you look at the ability for humans to communicate in real time perspective, I mean, that really started back in, I think, in 1927 is when the first real time voice international call occurred, where someone here in our continent called somebody in another over in Europe. And so that was kind of the first uh, iteration of that. And of course, that has evolved over the years. And so the ability to call someone and talk to them in real time, not via telegraph or all slow mail. There's all these ways humans have communicated over the years, but to actually do it in a real time voice perspective really started in 27. By the 1960s, AT&T was offering international calling from landlines from your home. You could call internationally, but at that time they were advertising like $12 a minute.
Yes.
And so not too many people did that unless you had a really important call. By the 1980s, that got down to about $1.20 a minute. And then by the time you got to the 90s, they dropped that to 60 cents a minute. So compared to the original, that sounds like a big bargain, but still, the problem what it did is it caused a lot of bad debt, caused a lot of fraud because people would run up huge bills and then not pay them. And so even as prices dropped, the cost to the actual consumer continued to stay pretty high. And so by the 1990s, you really got the advent, it really kind of sparked the whole prepaid phone card industry because it was so expensive on a landline at that time that people came out with phone cards and using them from payphones and places and so forth. And so that evolved over the next 20 years. And unfortunately, that industry caught themselves in, again, a lot of different players. There were low barrier to entrance to that. And so people could get in and offer that. And a lot of people got ripped off. And it really, unfortunately, educated the consumers about not to trust it.
I think when you say they got ripped off in the fraud, if my memory serves me correctly, you would buy a card that maybe gave you 50 minutes for for $10, but in reality, you were getting about 32 minutes.
Or you get made one call and the card was all the fees would take the rest of the money off.
Oh, okay.
And so I have one story to share because by the time we got to the late or mid 2010s, about 2013, 14, when I was head of an industry association, was up in front of at the FCC in Washington in front of the head of enforcement for FCC. And they were slamming their fist on the table that every phone card, we're going to regulate this so that every phone card you sell, you have to literally have like an encyclopedia or like a phone book tied to the point of sale that says, here's what the amount of minutes you're going to get to every country in the world.
Yep.
And so they were just, you got to do that. We're going to regulate this. And I remember in the room bringing up, this is like a gift card. You have a $10 value, you have whatever the value, you have a value. If I buy a $10 Home Depot gift card, and I go into Home Depot, are they guaranteeing me the price of nails when I bought that card, or the price of hammers, or the price of anything? And that really kind of set them back. Ooh, well, maybe that isn't a good idea. Okay, well, let's work on making sure what you deliver is correct and you correctly identify to people what you're offering and regulate that, not try to put basically a telephone book at every point of sale. So that industry really kind of drove itself into the ground. It got to the point where $2 and $3 cards, and so it was not a good time. And network IP, even though we enabled that industry for companies like General Electric and stuff at the time, we weren't actually making the cards. We weren't actually doing that. We were providing the infrastructure technology to make them work. But as we evolved into the mid 2000s, 10s, the mobile industry finally woke up. You had MVNOs out that time that were looking at trying to just have another point of something a little bit better than everybody else did.
Right.
And so a differentiator. And so they started to get into that. And you started to see things like Unlimited. And we were one of the first companies to offer that kind of product. Also, by the time you get the mid 2010s or even early 2020s, the advent of the apps. And so now everything from WhatsApp to Skype and WeChat and Viber, and there's literally 1,000 apps in the marketplace today that you can communicate around the globe. And so by really in the last couple of years here, the international voice traffic the traffic that people call to make a voice call overseas and around the world actually it's continued to grow. It actually is growing about 10% a year still. But now half of that in those minutes or half of that volume is on the apps.
Okay.
And
Wow.
so it is
Yeah.
something that's going away, but the industry, the mobile and others really haven't. In fact, you'll see some mobile operators in their advertising tell you, go use Viber, go use Skype, go use. I mean, it's like, why are you pushing customers away instead of adapting your products?
Well, yeah, I think part of the bundle that a lot of MVNOs and obviously the three big carriers here in the country um, include that as in their marketing, that unlimited uh, international calls to 70 countries or 90 countries. And that's something that, yeah, it's great. And I want to touch base in a little bit about the difference between international calling and roaming, because that's got a lot of people confused. But um, so where are we now with the whole thing? I mean, why would a carrier or an MVNO steer you away from them?
So one thing you got to realize is that it is extremely confusing. You ask any typical subscriber of any service of what do they get today or how do they make an international call to call friends and family. I mean, the ultimate point here is staying connected to friends and family. I mean, that's been our ultimate mission and vision for a long time. And how do you do that? And so you look at an average consumer today, and we'll talk a little bit about calling and we'll talk about roaming as well. But this issue of what's it going to cost me? How do I do it? And so you look at the main carriers, the big four, I call the big four now because there are four. There's T-Mobile and Verizon and AT&T and EchoStar
Hmm.
or Boost or whatever name you
Right,
want to call them
right.
these days. But the
Dish, yeah,
Dish, but the
yeah.
issue there is that on the big guys, they are yeah, you can have 80, 90, whatever country, 85 countries on the big carrier, but you got to pay them $15 first. So this isn't you buy a $60 plan or $100 plan and they just give it to you. You got to pay them another $15 and then you can call those countries. And oh, by the way, if you want to call anywhere else in the world, oh, that we'll give you instead of a buck a minute, we'll give you some discounted rate to it. So it doesn't even include that. So the $15 is just so we can talk. Now, if you go to the top performers or the top offerings in the industry, they'll have I mean, $50 plan, $60 plan, and it's included. You can call up to, I mean, in some cases up to 100 countries unlimited, and it's capped to the rest of the world. So they'll actually let you call anywhere in the world, which we show on systems like that, that 95% of the consumers get all they need. Don't need to think about anything more. Just freaking call.
So I use some of my clients for my consulting company. I use WhatsApp and Signal, and to the best of my knowledge, I'm not paying for that. Correct?
As long as you call somebody who's on WhatsApp, which
Right. Yep.
what's happened is the big callers, we call the heavy users or the ones that are calling all the time, have moved to WhatsApp and moved to others because who they're calling have it. The problem is more the opportunity here, which we're going to talk more about in a bit. The opportunity here is more what we call the casual users, the ones that are maybe weekly, maybe monthly. They don't call all the time, but this issue of who they're calling, are they really making sure, have you got the right app and all that kind of stuff on each end? So yeah, if you're going to call app to app, that is the cheapest ultimate solution. So the issue will humans at this point, at least the ones that are casual, go through the effort to figure out an app if they need it, or the person on the other end have the app, or just call. And so we believe that's the disruptor in the marketplace now, just like it used to be with calling from New Jersey to Iowa or whatever. It was a different price and different cost. Now it's just included.
Right.
So same thing's now
Right.
happening with international calling
Okay.
from stateside.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about calling versus roaming. I think there's some misconceptions. I think in layman's term, roaming is when you are traveling somewhere where your home carrier doesn't have a network, you jump to another domestically, you jump to another carrier. And that's usually included, as you said, bundled in the high end plans, domestic roaming, as I understand it. And then when you're roaming overseas, you get charged X amount of dollars per day if you use the phone.
Right.
Yeah.
So just like it's been very confusing for consumers here from stateside,
Yeah.
because it's all over the map. But
Right.
from a roaming perspective, you've got a similar problem. It all depends on the country they're trying to interface into. I think the top carriers are now listing, 60, 70 countries for $10 a day. You can call and data. Usually the biggest part of roaming for most people is the access to data, so that you're out. Yeah, you can go on Wi-Fi networks and so forth and do stuff. But if you can have data when you're out visiting and on vacation and so forth. And so the whole thing there is, the problem is it's all over the map as well. I mean, if you average, in fact, I think the FCC on their website says if you're going to travel internationally, you should contact your carrier, clearly understand all the rules, and if you use this much data, they're going to charge you this much more. And it's almost like I got to plan where my hotel is, and I got to plan where I'm going to maybe eat while I'm over there, and oh, you better plan out what you're going to do for making calls back or being in contact, because it's not an easy thing. And I think that's the real opportunity down the road, is to make that just as easy as we're trying to make international the other way. But yeah, there's no, I can't give you, say, if you just do this. We used to tell people, if you don't want to incur costs when you travel internationally, turn airplane mode on and then turn Wi-Fi on and connect to Wi-Fi and go from there, and then use your apps and so forth. But some people, for $10 a day, well, maybe I'll turn it on today, and other days you don't turn that on, because the moment you turn your phone on and allow it connect to the network, boom, another $10 hits your.
So, what is the opportunity for mobile providers right now in the international long distance space?
Well, if you look at the world and how it's evolving from a communication perspective, and that today we're sitting here in the United States with the foreign born, which is a key person who needs to call internationally from stateside, that's at the highest percentage in 112 years. So we now have almost 15% of the U.S. population that right out of the bat has a need to call and stay in contact with family. On top of that, we believe the estimates are conservatively right now that 20 to 25% of the U.S. population has a need to communicate internationally. And so
that's a big number. That's a big number.
That's 80 million people.
Yeah, yes, that's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people. And so this is not a niche of maybe one or two places or whatever. It's around the world. I mean, making it so these people, these consumers that have that need, can just pick up their phone and call. They can stay connected to family. They're not having to search. They're not having to go find an app. They're not having to go find a phone card that may or may not exist and use a payphone that's definitely gone. But the issue is stay connected to family. And so with that, we believe that the problems of the past, if we stick with the old trends of all the carriers just kind of following the herd and trying to protect their revenue streams and so forth, because it's not the same as it was. It's all going down. If they're still offering even prepaid or postpaid international calling, every one of those that we've been around are all losing market share. It's like somebody flushed the toilet and it's all going away. And so we'll just got to keep protecting as much as we can. So that really we're pushing, or we think the opportunity is changing the narrative and really going and focus on that 95.5%, or 95+% of these casual consumers with intermittent and consistent international need. And so if we look out there, of all the people that use international calling, there's only about 5% that really abuse it and really can hurt you. And so the opportunity is to wall off from those. Let's focus on that 95% that we can give them unlimited plans. We can let them call other places around the globe and it not cost. I mean, the opportunity is as a bundle, or even if you have, let's say you had $20 or $30 plans and you wanted to add a $10 add-on for this bundle, then they can call. And we're showing that that's growing like a weed. Every place we've put that with our clients today, it's working and it's growing. And so, go ahead.
Who is your client? who is your customer? Are the carriers, the MVNOs,
Yeah,
not the end
MVNOs,
users?
MNOs. We've got over
Yeah,
35 different mobile operators today using us
good. Okay.
for their
In the
service
US?
in the U.S.
Okay. And so your client or your customer is not me, the end user who needs to make a call. I make a call, and behind the scenes, you're working with the carriers and MVNOs to route that directly.
Right. So
Yeah.
until just recently, I mean, certainly in the last year or two, for many of the big carriers, the MNOs, because you really have an architecture. You have MNOs, which are the big four, and then you have MVNOs that are resellers. They're reselling. I mean, people don't realize, but I mean, even companies like Consumer Cellular resells AT&T or T-Mobile, and others resell Verizon. So the resellers historically have been somewhat limited here because initially it was only Sprint when they were around, and then T-Mobile kind of got into it a little bit, but the other carriers did not, and they made it almost impossible in the fact that if you were an MVNO reselling, again, I'll mention, I guess, AT&T or Verizon, you were stuck. You literally had to dial the subscriber would have to dial a local access number, then dial their international number, and again, it sounds like an old prepaid phone card, and so that really kind of hampered the industry. But one of the things that Network IP cracked here a couple of years ago was we're now directly connected to Verizon, AT&T, T-Mo, and even Dish. And so now any MVNO out there today wants international, they can get it through us. And so that's really kind of opened up the marketplace. And unfortunately, it was such a difficult lift for some of these carriers that we're actually the only option because time they figured out how to do it after several years, they're like, we're not doing that again. So it's really opened up those MVNOs now to go out and add this to their value proposition as both I mean, everything from retention to acquisition to even we call VAS or value added services perspective
Yep.
where they
Yeah.
can make money on it. And
So if I was a heavy caller and I was on an MVNO that a couple years ago didn't offer this, I would be forced to leave that MVNO and go somewhere else so I could have international
your
calling.
options were a phone
Yeah.
card or go back to an old
Or,
phone card or use an
yeah.
app.
Okay.
Or
Okay.
dial or try to use their services. Unfortunately, the large carriers, none have ever provided very competitive rates. Through the bigger carriers like Verizon, they offered rates in a lot of cases, but they were so expensive that they weren't competitive. And so nobody could get above, they'd be lucky if they get above 1% of their users using it. And so it was just never a value. Where now we're seeing as high as 20% of our client subscribers using international.
Oh, wow. Where was that 10 years ago?
10 years ago on the mobile, just a few percent. I mean, it just didn't have the products. They really didn't have an option to do it.
Obviously, with this kind of a growth and new stream of revenue, as you can bundle and go a little higher in your overall rate plans, what roadblocks are out there for the carriers and MVNOs? What are they telling you, Pete, this is good, but, or is it integration, or where do you find you losing sleep at night?
Well, I think the lack of knowledge. I think this has been around as an outsider thing for so long, and pushed to the side because they couldn't do it or they couldn't. I mean, technically get their head around it. So part of that is things like this podcast helping them understand there are options, guys. You can go do this, and they're again stuck following the herd. I mean, so that was them. But also the MNOs, we already said the MNOs didn't have the flexibility to offer it, so MVNO could even resell it. Um, and again, that's really been the biggest things. That's been the roadblocks. I mean, the opportunity were the ones that were on Sprint that used us originally, and even some of the ones that used us on T-Mo and so forth. Again, saw good penetration with that and success with that. But now everybody is in the game.
Is it a competitive market, or I think you said earlier you were one of the only solutions?
Well, I think the competitive is how much attention do you want to give this? Our top product at this point is a global bundle, which basically is an offer to your subscribers at a certain price point that they can call anywhere in the world. And it includes 100 countries unlimited. So imagine I can call 100 countries. It's unlimited. Just call. And then the rest of the world, there's an underlying like a $10 credit, which not even divulged to the customer, that just say, you know what, the rest of the world we're capped and you have generous minutes. The issue with that one is it's that by saying that, again, 95% plus of those subscribers never hit a wall, never hit a limit. And we even have a way to handle if that's done. So as far as the top competitive product in the industry, that's it. There are a few other companies that are on T-Mode today that offer similar, but they're still marketing it like an old prepaid phone card, which we're trying to get away from that. That just stop thinking about minutes or the rate per minute. Just call. Just stay connected to your family and friend. To me, that's the real narrative and the real opportunity at this point um, for these MVNOs.
I bought a hybrid vehicle from a guy. I've bought about 8 cars from over the years, and I asked him, "What does this do and what is this?" And he said, "John, just drive the car.
Just drive the car.
Don't worry about that. Just drive the car." You know. So okay.
What's interesting, because I'll go back 15 years ago. I was involved in a focus group, and so in Atlanta, Georgia, came in. They had translators, the whole thing. And they actually had a group of Hispanics in there, and they were talking about phone cards. And they actually had one guy that had bought a phone card that everybody like, well, that's a ripoff card. And they were getting after him. I mean, it was emotional, and they were screaming at each other, and we're like shaking our head. And then afterwards, we got to do some one-on-one interviews with some of the people, and over, I heard, just let me call. Just let me call home. I don't want to have to think about this. Why are you making me think about this?
Right.
So 15 years later, we're now doing that.
Yeah. So. Another great anecdote, back in the early days of cellular, I joined in the early 1990s, where we were doing credit checks on everybody. No matter, the doctor, lawyer, or whoever it was, went through a credit check. And one of our senior executives said, I fly across the country, go to the rental counter, show them my license, and they give me a $50,000 car to drive away with. What are we doing? And it made us all think. They said, okay, let's get in a room and whiteboard this. And there's got to be a better way to lower the entry restrictions for customers. It's crazy what we did back in the days. But
I think we're on the verge now. If I look at the number of companies that are even using us and even outside of us that are doing this today, that another 4 or 5 years, everybody's just going to be, it's just going to be part of a bundle. It's just no different than calling state to state. So, and I'm hoping too that roaming gets to that point. And I will make a roaming point here that with all the carriers now, with all the MNOs, if the MVNO has negotiated, and let's say has roaming through that carrier through around the globe, that now those MNOs deliver that call back to us. So let's say you're sitting in France and you're going to then turn around and call the restaurant across the street to make a reservation through that roaming deal. That will handle that second part of that call. It'll be part of your plan. And so we're slowly getting there, so the whole world can be anywhere, because that's the ultimate vision here, is you can go anywhere, you can talk to anybody, and it's just included. Right. So
going back to the 5% of the people who abuse the system, who monitors that usage? Do you say to the carrier, hey, you have a problem, or does the carrier call you and go, what the heck is going on here? This guy's using 1 million minutes a week. What's the process flow there?
Well, it's interesting because the model, because of regulatory, and I won't get into that today, but the network IP's model for the mobile industry is that we take care of everything. We are the service provider. We take all the risk of those abusers and so forth. We manage that. We have all the algorithms and all the stuff to manage that and monitor that and in real time take care of that. That, again, it's for somebody else to replicate that or try to take on that responsibility. Most of these MVNOs don't have the time for that. I mean, that's not, so we do it.
But do you contact the MVNO and say, hey, you have a problem here?
Or absolutely.
You don't shut a customer off.
We have set rules that we do with our clients, and depending on their rules, we follow those. And fraud and abuse is something that we take the responsibility for. We're on the hook for that. And if we don't address it with our carrier, then that's shame on us. But certainly that's a key value.
There's a lot of MVNOs out there that are hopefully going to see this or listen to it. And how big is your opportunity still? I mean, you've got, I don't need to share numbers, but you've got X amount of MVNOs that you're doing business with, but how big is your pie to still go after?
Well, today we're serving about 15 million subscribers. So the MVNOs and MNOs that we're have today that have contracted with us equates to about 15 million and growing. I mean, our challenge actually is MVNOs who call us who really have zero customers, and I mean we have a minimal and all that kind of stuff because we can't spend all our time and energy on somebody who hopefully will be successful. So our biggest challenge is just again taking on clients and working through so that give them the best chance. But I can't take everybody.
Right. Well, I'm working with, at the core of our consulting business, Atrium Unlimited, getting people up and running in the MVNO business when they have an idea. An entrepreneur has a good differentiator, as you said earlier, as I say all the time, and they get a contract either directly with one of the large carriers or their aggregators. And these are all pre-revenue startups. And I know that the three I'm working with right now have signed agreements with your company to offer. So these are people that may fall into, as you said, that category of, you know, they're not doing business with you yet, but the opportunity is there because of their differentiator and how many customers they're going to put on. They could be a major player in this space. So, I mean, the welcome mat is out, correct?
Oh,
For new
absolutely,
clients.
absolutely. And again, we're
Yeah.
trying to evaluate opportunities every day.
Okay.
And we, again, this is our business. We decided over the years here as we've adapted. I mean, you don't make 26 years doing the same thing. And
Right.
so
Of
trying
course.
to
Of course.
adapt,
Yep.
we've really made this our key niche that we're focused on at this point. I
Good.
used to do apps. I don't do apps anymore.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so we're focused on this.
Good. With all that being said, 26 years, what was the aha moment? What was the impetus to you to say, I'm going to start network IP? Was it all the experience you had with the calling cards and the association? What was you said, okay, this is an opportunity?
Well, initially, I'm going to go back to when we started Network IP. I actually
Mhm.
it started. I think on my bio you saw I started as chief technology
Yep.
officer for an operator services company,
Yep.
and they were looking to expand their business. And I had was one of the co-developers of a technology at Nortel. I don't know if you remember that company. They
Yep.
used to
Sure
be
do. Yeah.
around, but
I don't
I
know if our
outlasted
younger,
them. But
yeah,
certainly
yeah.
they had a technology I helped develop and really bring to market that allowed companies to go do things like prepaid calling card at scale. Back at the time, all they had was these little boxes, and everybody was trying out of capacity. And every Sunday, you got busy signal, and that whole industry was just beleaguered and I mean, out of control because it was growing so fast. And so we stepped in and took big Nortel iron at the time and turned it into a big dumb switch so that we could do all of our programming, all of our services externally, and drive that switch. I that's that's the start of us, and so we started that. It's interesting. I just got rid of my last Nortel switch 2 years ago. I
Would you?
never thought I'd still have, but trust me, I wasn't using much of it anymore. So it's all VoIP now. It's all the
Yep.
latest
Yep.
technologies. But that really, I mean, I think we grew something like 10% a week every week for like 30 weeks. It was just
Wow.
I mean, one of those things when you're sleeping on the couch at night, hoping that you've figured out the last problem you had to overcome. But again, network IP has created really in the industry. Anybody out there? I mean, our issue is to do it right, make sure it works. There's no such thing as getting services out to consumers that don't work. It
Right.
never
Yeah.
people, I got the cheapest price, but if it doesn't work,
Right.
it won't
Exactly.
last long.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so
Right.
we've had to really make sure, and we've got all these technologies we've patented and so forth to make sure
Mhm.
every call gets where it needs to go, and we just make it work.
Good. Terrific. Well, your customer is the carriers and the MVNOs.
Right.
If I'm an
Yep.
MVNO watching this over my coffee and I want to contact network IP, how do I do that?
Well, you can certainly, we'll give you an email address to my VP of sales, and I'll
Okay.
let you guys share that here online.
Okay. I see it on the screen right here. There it is.
Yep.
And
Yep.
your website is
Networkip.net.
networkip.net.
Yep.
All right. Not .com. So
Well, it's in the
.net.
early days when we first came up with this, somebody camped on it and wanted huge amounts of money for it, And really, if you look at it, we've been so established in the industry. I mean, the carriers all tell their MVNOs come to network IP. I mean, it's not like we're even our social media, which that's another story. That conference I sat in Barcelona that one time with all the social media guys kind of ruined me for social media. But from the perspective of the word out, I mean, things like this can help. But certainly, we know pretty much everybody, and again, we'll sit down with them and figure out the best solution for them.
That's my line, Pete. I know everybody.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to lease that to you. So, Pete Pattullo, thank you very much. I know that you pick up the phone and you dial a foreign country and it's nice and easy, but it's a lot that goes behind that. And I think what you said earlier is making it the path of least resistance for the customer to call family, friends, loved ones, et cetera, et cetera. That's what happens. And it looks like you guys have the secret sauce to make it work. So, Pete, I want to thank you very much for coming on the podcast today. I'm sure you and I will cross paths again in the very near future. Anything else you'd like to leave our listeners and viewers with?
No, just call. I mean, don't hesitate to call friends and family anywhere in the world, please.
And if you're in Europe, please call, right? It's not going to cost you anything. Okay, very good. Pete Pattullo, CEO and founder of Network IP. Thank you very much again. That's going to wrap up another episode of the Boon of Wireless. We'll see you next time.